Cyan Vert, the illegitimate son of the Duke and the Empire's deadliest assassin, is betrayed by the noble brother whose shadow he's always lived under. But just before the killing blow lands, Cyan awakens to find he's a young boy once more. Reborn as the young lord, he's determined not to live in anyone's shadow this time, so get ready for a thrilling journey of revenge and action. Dedicate your life to upholding the honor of the family name. These were the words that his father would always say to him. What he meant by it is that he should wish for nothing except to attend to his older brother like a shadow. As a man wearily falls down, another person slowly walks towards him and remarks that one couldn't pay to see such an ordinary sight. A lone knight holding his own against the fiercest warriors of the continent. He addresses the man as Lord Cyan Vert and cheerily says he really is his younger brother. The man slowly addresses the person snidely looking down on him as Boris and asks who paid him to do this. He slowly summons a dark violet sword and asks if it was that emperor. Boris notices the vile black mist emanating from the sword and realizes the rumors are true. Cyan unleashes his power as Boris says he's an assassin belonging to the mist. Pissed, Boris says the mist is truly a fog that casts a pall over their order of light, and that he will make a report stating that he quashed a heretical rebel. Cyan tells him to go ahead and do it if he still has a mouth left after this. However, he's not going to have a single tooth left after they're done here. Boris shields himself and tells Cyan that if he's thinking of escaping by using a secret technique, he can forget about it since he's cast a level 9 magic barrier here. Cyan urgently remarks that he has to get out of here and tell his brother so that they can find out who's behind this. He declares that he will raise everything in his path before a voice suddenly tells him to stop, shocking him. His father always told him, dedicate your life to upholding the honor of the family name, for your brother Echel is the family's honor and Echel Vert's success is your success. Cyan's dagger is lighter than his daddy issues. Stunned, Cyan questions if his brother, Echel, was the one behind this. Echel slowly approaches him and remarks that his eyes tell him he doesn't know why he's here. Cyan slowly asks what that means, so Echel tells him that he performed his duties well. For the family name, for their people, and for him. For decades, he shouldered the weight of this duty, which is why he has come to lift that weight off his shoulders. Cyan's biggest mistake? Trusting his family. Clearly Echel is a low-life backstabber. Cyan drops his dagger in disbelief and questions if he did something wrong, hearing which Echel disappointingly glares at him and declares that with the sinister fog surrounding him, he is no longer a human. Now, he is nothing more than a vile murderer who has been deceiving them all this time. He asks Cyan if he's truly claiming that he doesn't know about the heinous crimes he's guilty of. Enraged, Cyan questions how he dared to call him a murderer and said his actions were heinous sins. The feud over the royal crown, the suppression of the demon army, and the war for the unification of the continent. He helped Echel succeed in everything he started because dedicating his life to him was also for his own good. He furiously clutches his dagger, crushing the ground beneath it, and inwardly asks if he's going to toss him aside now. After he worked like a dog for 20 years, he furiously gets up with the furious aura emanating out of his body and declares that it doesn't matter if he destroys his body because he's going to put his all in this moment as long as he can destroy him. As he lets out his powers in a fit of rage, the knights shockingly wonder how he's still got this much magic left, remarking that his powers are beyond human. Cyan maliciously declares that the fact that Echel is the supposed great hero of the continent, and yet he's so scared of his younger brother that he feels the need to kill him, is laughable, questioning if he doesn't have any shame. A vein pulses in Echel's temple before he and Cyan start battling. Cyan remarks that one hit is all he needs because he just has to hit a vital point that can't heal. As they clash, Boris suddenly uses his magic and stabs Cyan through his torso. Stunned, Cyan weakly drops his dagger as Boris remarks that he was hoping to give him a peaceful send-off since he is his brother after all, but he just had to reveal his true colors. He says he recognized Cyan's true nature not too long ago and is glad he never fully placed his trust in him. He kicks Cyan away and turns around to leave. Weakly lying on the ground, Cyan realizes that this is how it's going to end and admits he's led a truly foolish life, calling it pathetic. Suddenly, Echel turns around in shock to see Cyan angrily rushing towards him and aiming the dagger at his throat. However, Boris attacks him before his throat can get penetrated, throwing him away. Suddenly, Cyan wakes up and starts heavily gasping as a woman's voice calls for him, and she says it's time for him to get ready. Shocked, he recognizes her as Emily and asks what she's doing here. He suddenly remembers that it's been 20 years since he last met her. Puzzled, Emily asks if he's been dreaming as Cyan says she hasn't changed at all and sees that he's in his room from when he was a child and the furniture is exactly where it used to be. He checks his face and realizes he's young again before Emily sternly asks if he's acting like this because he doesn't want to go to the sparring match. She tells him to gather his courage and attend the match, so he confusingly asks what match she's talking about. Later, Cyan confirms that he's in the castle of the house of Duke Vert he used to live in when he was a child, wondering if his life is flashing before his eyes. He remembers this day from 27 years ago in March 1985 SC. 1 year before he entered the academy, there was a sparring match held at the beginning of each month in their territory and was an immensely important event that his father, the Duke, observed in person. His opponent was Krantz Vert, his half-brother who was the same age as him, and his mother was Margaret Argius, the Duchess, which is why, despite them both being the youngest of the 4 sons, Krantz received more attention because Cyan was an illegitimate child of indeterminate origins, and his humiliation this day made him a laughingstock to everyone, and that was when his father lost all interest in him. Presently, Emily nervously advises Cyan to just forfeit, but he says there's no need for that because he will win, inwardly sighing at the fact that even his maid thinks he's hopeless. He's suddenly surprised by how heavy the rapier feels in his hands and realizes he's back to his feeble 10-year-old self as Emily tells him to make sure to not get hurt. He says this is definitely not a dream or something flashing in front of his eyes, and he's never heard of any kind of magic that can create this kind of illusion, so he might have actually gone back into the past. Krantz admits he's courageous since he didn't expect him to actually show up, as Cyan realizes he might have the ability to change the past as well. He turns to look at his father, the Duke, before the bell rings and Krantz rushes towards him, arrogantly asking where he's looking. Undeterred, Cyan sees that he's as slow as a snail and easily dodges the attack. Annoyed, Krantz attacks him again, but Cyan easily whacks the sword out of his hand and kicks him on the foot, due to which he painfully falls down. Cyan remarks that the only thing he has to do to end the match is point the blade at his throat. But he's not satisfied by just that. Krantz used to make his life miserable for his own entertainment, and that harassment continued at the academy, which is why he has to beat him decisively so that he never even thinks of acting up again, because this time, he's going to live for himself. Later, Krantz suffered a crushing defeat in the sparring match, and the Duke even postponed his previously planned journey in order to meet up with him, so he must have made quite an impression on him. He even had his High Knight and personal bodyguard, Jurkin, escort him to his office. He sees the Duchess, Margaret, coming and remarks that she must be coming from the infirmary after tending to Krantz, which is why she looks so pissed. He asks how Krantz is, but Margaret angrily asks how he dared do that to his own brother. Cyan keeps walking with Jurkin and asks what she expected from a sparring match. Margaret sneers and says this is why you shouldn't mingle with people below your class, making Cyan pause in his tracks. She says it's no wonder he's crude since he comes from such a vulgar bomb, telling Cyan to be grateful he isn't living in the streets where he belongs. Cyan angrily turns around and remarks that she just crossed the line, questioning if he should kill her. Cyan stops himself and remarks that he has a much better way of making her life miserable, and he'll do it nice and slowly. He asks if she isn't worried by the fact that he and Krantz are going to be attending the same academy, since she must want Krantz to graduate with all his limbs intact. Margaret angrily asks how dare speak with that vile tongue and is about to slap him, but Jurkin stops her and says they can delay no further because the Duke is waiting for them. Annoyed, Margaret doesn't say anything and Cyan smirks, remarking that the Duke's orders are absolute and he's protected by the knight that receives the Duke's orders. Cyan enters the Duke's office and formally introduces himself, remarking that this is the first time they've talked privately in 15 years. Duke Wylier Vert is the great lord who rules over Velias, the western territory of the Wusif Empire. He is called by many the guardian of the continent, the great hero gifted with powerful magic and a sharp mind, and the one who stopped the invasion of the demons, the man who shouldered a duty that no one had asked him to until his death during the invasion of the Demon King. His only wish was for the peace of the continent, but his memory of him is slightly different, and he was a man who had chosen to live his entire life in the service of others. In other words, he was a fool. Young Cyan thought he had his family figured out, but it turns out he's been living in a soap opera with swords. Wylier says Cyan dodged the sword knowing exactly where it was going to land. Cyan doesn't understand, so Wylier explains that when Kratz lunged at Cyan, he saw the trajectory of his rapier and turned his body just enough to dodge it. He asks where he learned swordsmanship. Surprised, Cyan says he didn't and simply trained by himself every night, but Wylier remarks that the Cyan he knows has no aptitude in swordsmanship, let alone any interest in it, and asks how he managed to hide such talent. Cyan hesitantly says he just didn't want to draw any attention to him, but Wylier says he certainly outmaneuvered Krantz masterfully despite not wanting to draw any attention, but what he did afterwards seemed quite excessive. Taken aback, Cyan wonders if this question is meant to judge his character. Cyan confidently says he wanted to prove the fact that although they might be half-brothers, he is superior to Krantz, and he came to the conclusion that that is the true purpose of these sparring matches. Unexpectedly, Wylier starts chuckling and says that was a very straightforward answer, and that he's overjoyed he has such talent because he's going to be of great assistance to Achel someday. Shocked, Cyan realizes nothing's changed and his father is still obsessed with Achel. He angrily clutches his fists as Wylier says the term prize might not be correct here, but he wants to give him something for winning the match. Cyan inwardly declares that if this is the way it's going to be, he'll destroy everything that scumbag Achel sets out to do. Later, Emily shockingly questions how he could ask to be sent to the front lines. Cyan says that's what he told him, but nothing has been decided yet, so Emily asks if he's gone nuts and if he has any idea of what it's like out there. She frighteningly says it's crawling with hideous, evil demon beasts as Cyan explains that their territory is Velia's, the westernmost region of the Wusif Empire, and it is the only place in the empire that is referred to as the front lines. The foremost area of the front lines is the Lemia Valley, where the centuries-long war against the demons continues to rage on. Father was vehemently against him going there, but he eventually consented on one condition: he must become qualified to go to Lemia Valley within a month. However, he doesn't know what the qualification is yet, but the first thing he'll try to do is to build up as much muscle as possible, because he's still really weak compared to his peers. Fortunately, the only thing he still has going for him is that he has his battle instincts from his previous life, and he still feels a bit of magic in his body, so he'll be able to make good use of that magic if he trains his body, so he should start training immediately. Suddenly, a girl named Ellis rushes into the room and grabs Cyan's collar, angrily asking if he's lost his mind as Emily says she's glad to see her well. She asks Cyan if he really asked their father to let him go to the front lines, remarking that he must think of himself as a real warrior just because he beat Krantz in a sparring match, but she won't stand this, quickly telling him to head to the rooftop. A while later, Ellis faces off against Cyan and says they will begin the moment their swords are drawn. If he can withstand her attacks for 3 minutes, she will allow him to go to the front lines. Cyan asks if this is really necessary, but she says she just wants to ask him one question and asks if he's interested in carrying on the family name. He inwardly remarks that he has no interest in that before Ellis prepares to duel him. He inwardly says this is turning out to be quite an eventful day. She lunges forward and their swords clash, surprising her when he manages to block her attack as Cyan hurriedly wonders if she really isn't going to hold back anything against a brother that's 7 years younger than her. Pissed, Ellis wonders if that was just a fluke and says he's better than she expected, seeing which Cyan realizes he's screwed. The only thing more dangerous than a demon beast is Ellis with a point to prove. She swiftly rushes forward and attacks again, but Cyan hurriedly blocks and manages to deflect the attack, shocking her. Cyan and Ellis break away from the clash, and he admits that was close since he might have killed her if he hadn't twisted his sword. Most Black Mist sword techniques kill the victim instantly, and considering how weak he is, it's going to be impossible to keep fighting her while trying not to kill her. He starts panicking and wonders how much longer it will take before the 3 minutes are up. He's making up for his lack of muscle by channeling his magic into his sword, but he's almost at his limit. Suddenly, Ellis starts chanting level 6 star magic and uses Aqua Blade, shocking Cyan, who wonders if she's actually trying to kill him when this was supposed to be a test. More like Aqua Shock when your sister's trying to end you during a test. Enraged, Ellis constantly says she won't lose, seeing which Cyan says this is bad because her eyes have completely clouded over. He remarks that even if he blocks her attack, he's going to be blasted over the castle walls, which means there's only one thing he can depend on. He rushes forward to face her head-on, questioning what's taking so long before Jurkin suddenly rushes in between them, telling them both to stop and blocks Ellis' attack with his sword, resulting in an explosion. As the dust settles, he asks Ellis if she thinks this is a bit excessive when her opponent is the young Lord Cyan. Cyan breathes a sigh of relief and admits he thought he wasn't going to come for a second there. Ellis suddenly realizes what she did and hurriedly apologizes to Cyan, remarking that she must have lost her senses for a minute. She breaks down and says she just couldn't stand seeing him go to the front lines, but she was so intent on stopping him, she completely forgot what she was doing. Cyan slowly smiles and remarks that she always gives it her all no matter what she does. He introduces Ellis as his older sister, remarking that even at the academy, which is home to the most talented students of swordsmanship, magic and academics on the continent, Ellis was an unmatched S-class elite in all subjects, and because she even had the beauty to match, people called her the godchild. Having grown up with a sword in her hand, she and Echelle were both considered the next potential guardians of the continent, but her life came to a tragic end not long after she entered the Order of Light. Ellis might be called the godchild, but Cyan's just trying not to meet the gods too soon. He happily embraces her and admits he missed her, vowing to protect her this time. Ellis asks Jurkin if he isn't her father's guardian knight since Wylier just left on a journey, so Jurkin says he's following the Duke's orders to protect Lord Cyan for the time being, but he has not told Lord Cyan because the Duke had told him to do it secretly. Cyan says he noticed it as soon as he left Wylier's office and wonders if he wouldn't have come out if he did a better job pretending not to notice. His eyes start drooping, and he wonders why the Duke told Jurkin to protect him in secret. He suddenly falls unconscious, surprising Ellis, who smiles and remarks that he's still a child after all. Ellis returned to the academy the next day because she had just come to see father before her graduation. Realizing how badly he needed to build up his strength, Cyan focused on exercising for 2 weeks, but it's been 2 weeks of disappointment. He isn't able to get past 10 push-ups and remarks that his physique used to be one of his strong points, so he quickly needs another plan. Emily tells Cyan that she has a package sent by Ellis, but questions what this concoction is since it smells so bad. Cyan remarks that this is Hellhound's blood. He took advantage of the fact that Ellis felt bad about their little duel by having her send some as a favor. It's a rare item that can only be obtained from Lemia Valley, but it turns out the rumors about it also being available on the black market were true, because the blood of demon beasts smells atrocious and causes a burning sensation in the mouth. It is considered a poison by most, but it actually permanently increases physical and magical power if you drink it. Most people think this is a myth, but he saw it works in his previous life with his own eyes. Emily hesitantly asks if he's going to drink that, so he says he is, but tells her not to worry after all. He's the only person who ever learned to stomach her cooking. He remembers her first dish, mushroom soup, that made his heart stop for a moment after the first spoonful. Compared to that, Hellhound's blood is delicious. A scarlet aura suddenly starts emanating out of his body, and Cyan tells Emily he's going for a little walk, remarking that he wants to test how the Hellhound's blood worked. He reaches another spot he hadn't seen in a long time, and says he's been waiting 2 weeks for this day, the day that Jurkin leaves him to give his routine report. He says it's a pain having someone tail you all the time, and that he used to come here all the time when he wanted to be alone, but then one day, Betrayal received a divine revelation from Lumendal, the god of light. The revelation said that an ancient shrine was hidden somewhere in the backwoods of Velias. They weren't sure whether to believe it or not, but they eventually found a spot with a concentration of mana flow. Of course, the revelation hasn't happened in this life yet, so right now, he's the only one who knows about it. He suddenly activates the spot and tells Echelle that never in his wildest dreams could he have imagined what he's about to do as a stairway suddenly appears in the ground. Cyan slowly descends the staircase and remarks that it's different from when he came here before, explaining that before the War of the Gods and Demons, 300 years ago, when all history was wiped from this land, this place used to be a shrine dedicated to the god of light, Lumendal. He wonders who could have imagined that a place like this was hidden in their own backwoods. Something suddenly starts glowing, and he sees the master of the shrine, the sword Echelle used. August 12, 999 SC. Humans finally succeeded in driving out the demon army that was occupying Velias. The humans were no match for the demons, but through the discovery of the ancient relics called the weapons of gods, swift victory was rewarded to humans. One of these relics was Durin Dark, a holy sword blessed by Lumendal, the god of light. It was one of the most important weapons the gods used to drive out the demon army, and it was the same sword that Cyan's brother, Echel, would later come to own and use to ruthlessly slay him. He remarks that Darien Dark might just be related to his past in some way and touches the sword, remarking that nothing's happening as expected. He kicks the sword and walks away, annoyingly saying all that did was put him in a bad mood, so he should just do what he came here to do. When you go beyond the light, you can see an odd shadow. It's easy to mistake it for the sword's shadow, but that would make no sense since this is no shadow. Where there is light, there will also be darkness. Shrouded by the altar of light is a path to yet another chamber. He slowly enters and remarks that it sure is nice to see his magic sword, Karam, again. He picks it up and says it's time to wake up, admitting that he just loves the familiar feeling and can't wait to slice something with it. A voice suddenly says he's quite a daring boy and asks if he not knows what awakening it means, so Cyan says it might mean this sword is his now, but a shadow slowly gets up and maliciously says he was foolish enough to awaken a magic sword, so now it's too late, even for regrets, because it's going to take over his body now. However, Cyan suddenly grabs the shadow's throat, shocking her, and remarks that he doesn't recall it being so reckless. Shocked, the woman asks how he's able to touch her, so he threateningly says it told her she belongs to him. The shadow suddenly slashes at him and rushes away from him, asking who he is and if he could be the successor. She questions why she feels the energy of air on him, so he confirms that he's Air's successor and tells her to bow down for her master has returned, addressing her as the magic sword Karam. Enraged, she says he's just a snot-nosed boy and refuses to accept it. She rushes forward and starts relentlessly attacking Cyan, who remarks that it looks like words aren't going to cut it. A magic sword's ultimate goal is to take over the wielder's body, so she leaves him no choice, and they're going to make this simple. He grins and uses sword manipulation, due to which she suddenly collapses. Cyan says he's only going to say this once. He suggests she accept him as his master before he has to use force. Karam furiously asks how he knows that incantation, so he keeps continuously using sword manipulation and asks if she's willing now. She hesitantly agrees and agrees to submit a little, so Cyan uses sword manipulation again, after which she quickly submits and addresses him as her master. Since he's gotten what he came here for, Cyan says he should probably head back now since he's been away too long. Karam returns to the sword and says she can't remember the last time she breathed outside air, and that it's exhilarating. She asks what his name is and questions if he's asking her to believe Air really chose a kid like him. He says it did in his previous life because he's died once before. Shocked, she wonders who he is and sees that the holy sword is still asleep. Cyan says its master probably won't show up for another 20 years, hearing which Karam says it sounds like he knows something she doesn't before he suddenly slashes off the hilt of the sword and takes a bit. Stunned, she asks what he plans to do with it, so he sneers and admits he's not sure yet, but it's definitely going to make things a lot more interesting in the future. Cyan gets out of a cart and remarks that it's already the promised day, admitting that time sure flew by. Wylier says he's going to ask him one more time and questions if he's still determined to go to the front lines, and says he won't hold it against time if he chooses to back out now. However, Cyan is determined and says his heart is already at the front lines. Wylier tells Jurkin to release it, so he activates a summoning scroll and a hellhound suddenly appears before them. Cyan recognizes it as a low-level beast from Lemia Valley, remarking that it looks like Wylier and the knights went through some trouble preparing this test. He sees that the knights might step in if things get too dicey, as Wylier tells Cyan that if he is indeed resolute about going to the front lines, he's going to prove it through this trial. Jurkin remembers how 3 days before Cyan heading to the front lines, he asked Jurkin to spar with him since he can't just practice by swinging his sword in mid-air and needs some real experience. Jurkin says he should fight with someone closer to his age if he wants to spar, so Cyan innocently says he isn't sure why, but Krantz keeps avoiding him. Since he's insisting so much, Jurkin agrees but states that he will only use his scabbard and will focus on defending, so Cyan can attacking as much as he likes. Cyan says he has one more request and tells Jurkin to not tell father one word about whatever happens here, declaring that it's an order. He suddenly rushes forward to attack, but Jurkin manages to block the attack and admits that was a heavy blow, wondering how a 10-year-old can hit so hard. He is awed by how fast Cyan is. He turns around to face him, but Cyan suddenly disappears and appears above him before their swords clash. He starts relentlessly attacking, but isn't able to get past his attacks and gets away, remarking that it looks like he won't be able to beat him yet. He thanks Jurkin for his help, and Jurkin wonders when he became so skilled. Presently, he remarks that based on what he felt that day, he's confident that Lord Cyan can overcome any trial. Cyan gets ready for the Hellhound's attack, and it suddenly leaps forward. Cyan dodges and admits that he's still too weak to fight demon beasts head-on, so he has to end this as swiftly as possible. He resolves to end its life in one blow and swiftly slashes through it, shocking the knights. Wylier slowly smiles as Cyan examines the hound's corpse and says he just wasted several bottles worth of blood, but he doesn't want to risk everyone thinking he's a weirdo. He decides to start carrying a cup as Wylier appreciatively tells Cyan he did magnificently and has proven himself worthy of going to the lines. Cyan slowly thanks him before Karam asks him if he takes her for a kitchen knife. He says she's a magic sword and asks why she's asking, so she angrily questions why he isn't using her, explaining that she needs blood for power. She hungrily eyes the Hellhound's corpse and asks him to just let her have one sip, so he says she has nothing to worry about because he's going to be using her a whole lot soon. The knights are suddenly informed that ogres have been spotted towards the northeast, so they quickly start battling the ogres as Emily hysterically asks Cyan why he wanted to come here. Cyan remarks that he's returned to this place which still looks hellish. Wylier asks how he feels, so he admits he's a little nervous. Wylier explains that a soldier can fall at any moment on the battlefield. Cyan says he won't forget and remarks that there are usually 3 or 4 battles a day, and every battle is fought according to detailed response protocols with skilled high knights playing key roles to drive back the demon beasts that try to advance over the front lines. The tent that he's been assigned to is the one furthest from the front lines, and with so many guards assigned to him, he doesn't know how he's going to find prey for Karam. He sees Emily freaking out and tells her to just leave, so she angrily asks who's going to take care of him then and storms out, seeing which Cyan angrily says she doesn't have any respect at all for her master. At your service, my queen. Late at night, Cyan puts a doll in his bed instead of him and sneaks out of camps into an area infested with monsters to test Karam. He unleashes Karam and happily drinks the Hellhound's blood, delighting Karam, who says it's going to take forever to grow strong fighting mutts like this. But he cheerily tells her to not worry because the night is long and the monsters are plenty. Meanwhile, the Imperial Princess arrives at the camp with her servant, who tries to stop her, but when she doesn't give in, the servant informs her that the Duke's son is here as well, so they might be able to become friends. The Imperial Princess initially isn't looking forward to it, but she slowly asks for Cyan's name and seems interested in him. Boy, she sounds like a reluctant gold digger. Life's never boring on the front lines when you've got ogres at day and princesses intrigued by you at night. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. You can also join the channel to watch videos before they get publicly released, and I'll see you all next time.